This is the Gibraltar Point Lighthouse in Toronto, and it's on Toronto Island. It was built in 1808. It's not an active lighthouse for navigation, but it sits there today. And there it is in an 1834 map. So yes, it's still there. And there's another, it's more of a range light than a lighthouse. It's not in its exact location any longer. It was moved a certain distance away, but as well, the shoreline of Toronto was extended into the lake quite a bit by lake filling. So now this thing is surrounded by streetcars and condominiums. Anyway, let's see if there are people with questions. Has anybody got their hand raised? Diane had her hand raised.
I'd like to have anybody else who wanted to ask or make a comment.
I can't raise my hand. I've been trying and it's not working.
Okay, well, Seamus, just go ahead. We can hear you.
First of all, I'd like to say, Judith, I enjoyed your presentation very much. It was interesting, brought back lots of memories for me growing up in Ireland. And we used to spend the month of August on a coastal village called Skerries in County Dublin, about 20 miles north of Dublin, about 70 miles south of Belfast. The point was that there was a lighthouse, famous lighthouse called the Rockabill. And when I lived in the British Isles, when we get the marine forecast with the weather at night before they closed down at midnight, they would include Rockabill. It was a huge rock with a lighthouse about 20 miles, maybe 15 miles out from Skerries in the Irish Sea. Why I mentioned this was, as a very young boy, I was last there when I'm 72 now, I was 18. But I remember at certain times on certain days, ladies used to come down and they'd stand behind at the back of the harbor wall, which faced east out towards England and towards the Rockabill. And they would have in each hand, it was like two black flags on black sticks. And I asked a fisherman what the ladies were doing. And he said that those are signs they use to make a sign language, and they're communicating with their husbands who are away out on this rock, and they're stationed there for a couple of months. And this was way back in the early 60s. And that's how they would communicate. I suppose they would tell them that, you know, all is well, the children are behaving themselves, look forward to seeing you, trust you are well. They would only get a few minutes, and it would be different ladies on different days. In those days, they were generally the housewives or, you know, a teenage daughter. But that's how they kept in touch. And they would have binoculars, and I'm sure that they could, I don't know what they did. But anyways, that's what I was told, how they kept in touch. The Rockabill is still there. I'm looking at it on a map, but these are dormant memories. And I'll get to the point. The point was that your talk about lighthouses triggered a lot of memories for me from traveling around, you know, the British Isles, where a lot of lighthouses are now gone. A few are preserved, but you're right. It costs a lot of money to preserve them. Yeah. And thank you very much for helping preserve these treasures, because yes, we use GPS, but in those days, they were lifesavers for, right. And also in Ireland, the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, which also serves the Republic of Ireland, because it's a voluntary thing, which, you know, the people support with generous donations. That Rockabill was key, because there were a lot of fishing villages, and also it was on a shipping lane between Belfast, Dublin, and Liverpool and the Isle of Man. So where I saw more lighthouses, but I'd forgotten all about these important things. Thank you very much for regenerating my dormant memory.
Oh, I'm glad I did.
Are there
Is
any
there
other?
anyone else with questions or comments?
Okay. All right, I'll pick up here. Judith, I want to thank you so much for such an interesting presentation. I think many of our shellbacks have probably sailed down that outer waterway from New York to Chesapeake. I don't know how many of you may have gone up the Delaware and seen some of the lighthouses. We've got at least one person put his hand up here. But I wondered, with all of these lighthouses going into private ownership now, what is the safety of them, just the structure itself in standing? And did I understand correctly that you said that the government maintains the light itself?
Right. The government, when these are either passed over to another government entity or a nonprofit, or they're sold to somebody who at auction, they just auction them off. So the prices they've gone for are, range from $20,000 to several $100,000. It has nothing to do with the value, really. But in those, in the deeds are covenants that you're supposed to have to adhere to that give you specifications for what you can and cannot do to the structure. And they also include language that says the Coast Guard continues to own the light and will maintain the light and has to have access to the property in order to do that. Now, in theory, they could have that, they're supposed to have access anytime, they want to come, but in practice, I can tell you that in most cases where they've been sold to a public person, it's kind of like by appointment only, they go to take care of the light. In the case of our lighthouse, the Harbor of Refuge lighthouse, since it's offshore and, we don't want to necessarily have to rent a barge or a yacht to go out there and let them in. We just gave them a key and they go whenever they need to go. So the problem is that as they are discontinuing some of these lights that have been sold or passed on to other ownership, the lens remains in that building, because moving a Fresnel lens out of a tower is a massively difficult and expensive proposition. The Coast Guard is trying to deactivate that Liston lighthouse with that great big huge second order Fresnel lens and the prismatic reflector. And that's a national treasure, that lens. There are only two of them in the country. It's in spectacular condition, and it's just going to sit up there with nobody, paying any attention to it.
That's so interesting. When I visited Edinburgh with Sally and Noel a few years ago, I visited the museum there, and they had a Fresnel lens in the main hallway of the museum. It was lit from above with sunlight, and it was the same size, I think, as the one where you had your picture taken, because I looked at it and I thought, holy mackerel, how did they even get it into a lighthouse?
Yeah.
And I do not remember which lighthouse it was in, but I took a lot of pictures of that Fresnel light because it was just so.
The Glasgow Transport Museum. The first Fresnel was in Edinburgh.
I'm sorry, Elspeth, say that again.
Sorry, I was talking to myself.
Okay.
I didn't think I was unmuted.
No, I think you are unmuted. I don't know why, but you are unmuted. Anyway, Judith, I do want to thank you. I do have your address, I believe, so I will be sending you a little token of our appreciation for your time and effort and your great wisdom and knowledge of lighthouses on the Delaware.
And caring for them.
And caring for them. It's really, really important. I agree with you that we mustn't let go of some of these treasures that are around, both in your country and our country.
Absolutely.
Let's give Judith a nice shellback. Thank you for being here today. We really, really appreciate
Well, I'm
it.
glad it finally worked.
Yes, it did. It did. That was so good. That was so good. Did you have another comment?
I'm just saying, I'll see you on FaceTime soon.
We'll
Yeah.
just have to Zoom ourselves.
Yes,
yeah.
I also see that Noel has a question. He's got his hand raised, I
Oh,
think.
certainly.
Yes.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, not so much, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Just want to make sure before I say something inappropriate, because I'm not. But we're talking about lighthouses, with the Rockabill. I've sailed by that 2 or 3 times going up the Irish Sea. But Sally, there's a lighthouse in Dunmore East in Ireland, on the way up into Waterford. And years ago, Sally had the opportunity to buy that lighthouse and a house that went with it, and her brother talked her out of it. But since then, the person who bought it got looking at things, and the townspeople liked the light, so they made the government keep it operational. But because they had sold it, now they have to rent the light from the new owner. So he gets paid rent, and he's paid off his mortgage, and the government still pays him to run this light.
Is
So
Sally still
Sally's
talking?
waiting to kick her brother in the butt the next whatever she can, right?
That sounds like a good deal. I think that's worth pursuing.
It would have been a perfect deal, because it's a beautiful light and a beautiful spot of Ireland, on the Barrow River, you know, between about halfway up into Waterford from I guess it's the Irish Sea, or no, the Celtic Sea on the south end of Ireland, but that's good. So
Thank you so much, Noel. That was a nice
All
little
right.
anecdote to add to our lighthouse stories here. And just a reminder that coming up next week, we have Jane Finn and Mike Finn, and they're going to join us once more to share their unique experiences and adventures sailing the South Shore of Newfoundland. And I know that many of you have sailed that particular waterway. And Jane and Mike joined us last year and took us up to Red Bay and Labrador. And
That's
then
where Oak Island is.
no, Oak Island is near Nova Scotia, Halifax. And the week after, we have Peter Rowe. He's a filmmaker, and he'll join us for the 4th time to present his film Shipwrecked on a Great Lake. The film is about the maritime attack on Toronto in 1813, when the Lake Ontario storm that sunk the 2 American ships, and then the later discovery of the 2 ships off Port Dalhousie. And with that, we have pipes out and a reminder to join us in the rooms afterwards. Pipes out.